The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
So hello, a very warm welcome to the VAR show, the show which talks about always major football leagues in detail. Today we are going to connect with interviews and we have Mr. Jon Smith, who has been involved in various capacities in various fields, of which one was being a very maybe a pioneer in football agents. Which we'll probably touch on it because we are a football show, so we'll touch on that aspect more than maybe other parts. So first of all, I would like to thank John, who has come during these difficult times, even to talk to, even maybe even give 10 minutes. That's amazing, and thank you so much, John, for that. And I would like to begin by asking you, how have you been? And you have been someone who we generally are. We are scared. Okay, there's a COVID, there's a pandemic going on outside, but you have seen it from close quarters. How have you been, and what is it like?
It's not good. Well, it wasn't good for us. I mean, I know people, including my 83-year-old mother-in-law, who had it and was absolutely fine. We sailed through it. I think the problem is if you get a bad strain of it, and both my wife and myself got a particularly bad strain, and we were very, very ill over Christmas. And you can probably hear I'm still struggling 6 weeks later for breath. I think it's going to take 6-9 months for us to be able to get back to what we were pre-COVID. And also you got to be careful. I'm very fit. Well, I was very fit. I can't stress the body too much now because it puts too much stress on the lungs and the heart. And it's a if you get the wrong strain, it's life-threatening. We were lucky that we came through.
Definitely. And I had a list of questions, but I'll take only the important ones now. So I don't take. I'm feeling, although we are doing this, I'm feeling very bad of it because it's not a good thing to maybe pressurize you to do this at this point. Although hopefully I'm not pressurizing you to do this. So we'll get.
It's fine, Rishi. If it becomes difficult to talk, because I kind of run out of breath after a while, then I will tell you.
Sure.
It's okay. It's
sure.
all right.
Okay. Sure. So we'll get into how did you get into football first?
I was in the record business, and I was one of the guys behind what was commonly known as Northern Soul in the 1970s, and we had a lot of successful hit records around the world. And I sold that business. In 1981, and I went to live in America, in Los Angeles, and I loved what they were doing in sport. And I saw what we were doing in England in sport was a bit, I used to call it the dirty raincoat brigade. People would just turn up with a few £20 notes and try and get players to open supermarkets and things. And I wanted to do it professionally like we did in the record business. And I acquired the name First Artist, which was actually Dustin Hoffman and Barbra Streisand's movie company, and they junked it. And I loved the name. So I acquired that, came back here and set up a company with my then buddy, Paul Mariner, who was at the time just leaving the England football team. And we wanted to be the game changer. And fortunately, we became the game changer. We signed the entire England football team. And then I got lucky and I got Diego Maradona as well, but that was another story.
No, definitely, yeah. So just when you said that you signed almost the entire football team of England, and isn't that scary? For a team to have one particular maybe external who doesn't have direct influence to have control of maybe the full team.
Well, it wasn't. It was actually in those days it was their commercial right. So I had the England football team, but of course, a lot of the players would want me to do their football deals as well. So I had the entire team for what we call the players pool, and then I must have had about 10 of them maybe to do their football deals as well, including the big one, the first big one I did, which was with Peter Beardsley, going from Newcastle to Liverpool, which was a record-breaking transfer. And then Gary Pallister broke that record. No, Tony Cottee broke that record, and then Gary Pallister broke that record. So yeah, we were on a high all the way through the 80s and 90s, and in the early 2000s as well.
So, do you remember the first person or the first player you signed up?
Yeah, Terry Butcher, who
So-
went one of the first Englishmen that went to play in Scotland.
So, which year was that?
1986.
1986.
You weren't probably you
No.
weren't born.
No, I wasn't born. And the only memory I think I have of I have not watched Terry play. Also, the only thing I can associate with him is the famous picture, I think, in which he's I think playing.
Blood coming, yeah. Blood.
So that's one thing that's
What he's remembered for. That's right.
Yeah. So at least for me, that is the
Big-
only thing I remember him for.
He was the big giant. Yeah,
Yeah. So
nice guy.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So like you like you started in 1986, and you were kind of a pioneer in that in football in general, in being like representing player. Maybe in the initial part you did only the commercial one, but later on you got into the maybe the football part also, and you probably did not have any reference. So how did you go about doing it?
Well, the record business is not a million miles from the sport or sporting business, football business, and I just wanted to. And the football business as such, didn't really exist in those days. I mean, we were the first major agency, and then we actually took our agency to the London Stock Exchange. We went public. My height, we had 400 players around the world, but we also had we were there at the beginning with Rupert Murdoch and the start of the Premier League. So then we had all these big sums of money coming in, and we wanted to make England the best league in the world because we felt that the product was so good. Spice it up with a bit of continental flair, put some big sponsors, and we brought Coca-Cola into English football, and the Mars Corporation through Mars Confectionery. And all of that suddenly was a magic formula, and it really worked. And it's now probably the biggest watched entertainment on the planet. So that's something that I'm particularly proud of, to be part of that.
And not only that, like when I'm speaking to like it's like I'm talking to someone. It may I may get the wordings wrong, but it's like you're talking to someone who has lived through history, because not only you lived through maybe like you were in the business when you went from maybe the first division to maybe the Premier League. Also, you are there when you were representing player when the Bossman ruling also happened. Like.
Well, I actually knew Jean-Claude. There was Jean-Louis Dupont, who was his lawyer, and Jean-Claude. There wasn't Jean-Claude. Jean-Claude Bossman. No. Anyway, Monsieur Bossman, I remember very well. In fact, I engaged with him and made a film with him for Canal Plus about his life back in. When was that? That must have been the 90s, I think. So yeah, everything changed then because it meant that contracts, because of Jean-Marc Bossman, that was it. Because of Jean-Marc Bossman's ruling, everybody was then free to negotiate their transfer at the end of their contract. They didn't have a lien to their football club. So that changed everything, as did the trading windows when they came in 2003.
So definitely. And I wanted to ask you, like you said, like you knew John Mark Bossman, and you were there, and you were in the thick of things because you were representing players, and how much of that did you know while it was happening? Okay, this is going to change the landscape of maybe the management or the management of players totally, because now when a player gets down to maybe the last year or even last 2 years, the agent has a lot of say.
Yeah, look, all of that has evolved over time. It's become a very rapacious business. It's very different now. My kids are in the business now. It's very different from what it was in originally the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. I mean, I sold out in 2011, and I've stayed quite close to the business. I advise all sorts of people from our government here through to sporting franchises, leagues, and FIFA. and various other sports all around the world. So what's evolved really is that sport was sport, and then sport became less amateur, more professional, and then more and more professional until people like myself came along and made it an industry. And now it's a huge industry. So all the rulings have played into a whole different mindset of football. Now you have very often a player uses an agent to get to a certain place, learns from the agent, or the family do, and then very often now the family take over and the agent gets kicked out. Unless you're a big boy, and I was one of the big boys when I was there, but today there may be 6 or 7 big boys like Stella, WMG, people like that. They're good and they pay a lot of money to get these players, and the families are very grateful, or reasonably grateful anyway. Whereas the little agent now has to struggle because so you write on a 5-year deal, you go beyond year 3 and already there's a contractual talk, or even during year 3. Nobody wants to see someone play their contract out. So 2 years out is pretty much when everything starts to begin. And where's it going to go from here? Unfortunately, the new FIFA regulations aren't going to help. They're going to be challenged. They're not cleverly drawn up. I mean, we were part of a process, and we advised the people at the time that agents should be part of the process. And they were consulted once or twice, but they really weren't. So the new regulations have been drawn up by people who've never been agents before. And they're going to be challenged in the courts of law. So I think the next 2 years is going to be a bit of a mush. A corporate mush.
Definitely. And I wanted to ask you,
and of course, the whole world's changed because COVID, all the big clubs will be all right. The broadcasters will do well because the audiences are huge. And the rest of football is going to struggle. And that's not just football. I mean, I was chair of British Taekwondo for a while when we won the gold medals in the Rio Olympics. All those sports like Taekwondo, badminton, squash, all those sort of things need the Olympics, and there may not be an Olympics this year. Hopefully there will. But all those are the whole financial dynamic has changed. It's going to be a whole new world. People are going to have to realign how sport makes its money and how it manages its money.
Definitely. And there's a lot of talk about agents, and many of them, they are always put it in the bad light. Why do you think that they are put in the bad light when at the end of the day, in most cases, they want the best for their player? Is it like a PR move by the clubs?
It's easy to paint a bad picture, isn't it? All estate agents are rubbish, aren't they? Until you need one, then they're your best mate. So no, that's just it's a shame that there are some very bad agents, mind you, and there's a lot of money around it, which means it attracts the wrong people who want to use football players and clubs to wash cash and not pay tax. So yeah, there's a lot of regulation needs to be put in place, but it needs to be educated. The whole process needs to be educated regulation, not just, let's slap a fine on that, let's do. Some of the authorities are more concerned that if you break a minor rule by not filing your paperwork correctly, they take away your license, rather than look at the people who are absolutely breaking financial codes of countries to move cash about. But they don't want to go there because it's a little bit too complicated. It's not like the police sometimes, and I love the police, but sometimes it's easier for them to give a speeding ticket than go out in the middle of the cold night and try and chase a crook,
Definitely. And that I think that makes sense. And you have been involved in this profession for quite a while, and it's been 2011. Although you like you said, you have been in constant touch, maybe not directly but indirectly from in the football industry. And I think in one of your previous interviews you said like the agent's life is an unforgiving life. Like, could you elaborate a bit as to why it's so?
Why is it so what? Sorry, Agent's life
Like
is.
the unforgiving life. I think you had said this in one of your previous interviews in I think 2016.
Um, what did I say? The agents do what?
You said like an agent's life is an unforgiving life.
Unforgiving. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I didn't hear you right. Yeah, it is. It's harsh. But then, there are lots of. It's harsh being a health giver at the moment. Yeah, it is harsh. It's you have a 2 year contract. If we're talking football agents, you have a 2 year contract, and if you sign a 4 year deal, and the player leaves you after 2 years, in some cases you don't get the rest of your commission. Why? Because that's the way the regulations are drafted, and they're wrong. You can, I wouldn't recommend it, but you can give the family some money to help them along their way, sign the player, and then nothing happens for 2 years, and they take over, they keep the money, and it needs sorting out. It needs a really firm lead from the authorities of proper. There are many careers now that are forgiving, especially in the pandemic. Being a nurse, a health caregiver, that's very unforgiving, especially when you lose patients that you've become very attached to. That's much more harsh, much harsher than being a football agent. But the regulations are badly drafted, and you can have a 5 year deal that you've negotiated, but your contract with FIFA under FIFA regulations can only be for 2 years. So under some circumstances, you lose your commission after the second year if you haven't re-signed the player. And then there's about 1,800, maybe more, over 2,000 maybe now, football agents just in England, of which only about 10 do a really good job. The others are just like, those little corgi dogs that nip at your feet when you walk the park. They're like that. Some of them, not all of them. They're just looking to try and make a nick a bit of business here and there, so they can, because the sums are big. When I say nick a bit of business, you can jump on someone's deal, convince the family that you're the right person, and walk away with a six-figure sum. That can't be right. There are some very professional agents out there trying to do really well. As I say, probably 10 of them do really well. Then there's a whole raft of them that are trying to do the right thing, and it's an unforgiving market, yeah. And I'd like to see it regulated better to keep out the unsavory characters.
So, like you said, like how like maybe 10 of them are doing well, like as a abstract figure, like maybe 10 of them are doing well, and also like there are very few big players in the market, like maybe like you said Stella, and you have other few of them who are like maybe the big ones. Is it possible for some other entity, someone who wants to come from outside and do it, is it possible for that person to come and set up his or her business in this fold?
Yes, but it's difficult, very difficult, because getting onto the roundabout where players will even listen to you, or you'd have to sign them from a very young age, 16, 17, and hope that they're still with you when they potentially start making money in their late teens and early 20s. So it's very difficult. You've got to be connected, really, at the lower level to the scouts and the football clubs, and at the higher level to chief executives, sporting directors, those sort of people. And there's only so many people that can be in that marketplace.
Definitely. And like you have always stressed, like I think like when we whatever we have spoken till now, like how like although we do not see that, but like even agents can maybe be in a bad part of the deal where probably they would have invested on you maybe through some youth, and probably you leave them after some stage, and probably they won't benefit a lot. So I think have you personally experienced something like that during your career?
Yeah, many times. It's very easy if I'm your agent for someone else to come along and go, John's representing you. What's he getting you? £100, £1,000 a show? Oh, I could times that by two. Because of this, because of that, because of this, because of that. And it's sometimes people's heads turn. As I say, it's a very overcrowded market. There's a lot of people skating on the same ice. So you've got your reputation and your ability to deliver. There's a lot of deal talkers and not a lot of deal deliverers.
Definitely. So I'll ask you like 3 or 4 more questions before we wrap it up, and I'll not take much of your time. And for
Sure.
one of the ones is probably we have to touch upon, and the late Maradona, like you had represented him, like how did that happen? And also, I think even he left you after 1 or 2 years. So, like, was it like,
Yeah.
was it something like you when you look back, you think, okay, that was like maybe it could have been a much bigger thing?
No, I mean, I was fortunate enough to meet him through my friend Ozzy Ardiles, who knew him well, and he was looking for a new agent. We spoke to Ozzy. Ozzy and I happened to be in the same place at the same time, so we did some work for Diego for off and on for 3 or 4 years, and it was lovely. He was a lovely, lovely man, a lovely boy, a lovely man. He was two people. He was Diego, the human being who I enjoyed immensely, and then there was Maradona, the performer, who was a slightly different, more slightly more gregarious, outgoing individual. Um, and I think we did a decent job for him for nearly 4 years, just over 4 years, maybe circa 4 years. And then I got asked to leave by the people who had surrounded him in southern Italy, perhaps not the people you'd argue with, if you understand what I'm saying. So they had taken over, and I was relieved of my responsibilities. But it was a fascinating 4 years. He was a lovely man. I was always very fond of him. We met again a couple of years ago, but we sort of kept in contact every now and again. And then I met him when I was hosting the FIFA Global Awards in London 2 years ago, and we had big hugs on the carpet, on the green carpet. It was lovely. He was a lovely man. A bit like Princess Diana. It was always going to end before time.
Definitely. And yeah, I think it was very sad to see him pass away, like I think, and it was like a sad moment for generally for anyone who's associated with football or anyone who at least knows something about football.
Yeah, because his talent was supreme. It was a God-given talent.
Definitely. And like we'll move on from that. And you said like how you were asked to move out, like maybe from representing him in southern Italy. That I don't think that was the first one. I think you also mentioned like how in Ukraine you were almost kidnapped or something.
Yeah, that was in Ukraine. That's right. Yeah, there were behind what used to be the Iron Curtain in the 90s were some really interesting gangs of people, and they saw football in the 2000s as a way of moving money around. And sometimes, the deals you think are good, what sits behind those front people are those gangs of individuals. And we misjudged one and got kidnapped in Ukraine and had to pay to get out. Wasn't sure I was going to get out. Sitting opposite somebody trying to do a negotiation with a gun pointing at you is not the most conducive of environments. But you look back when it's okay now because it didn't happen. I didn't get shot, so it's okay. And it makes a good story for the book. But at the time, it's not what was in my job description particularly.
Definitely. And you mentioned like the book and the deal and personally I have not read it because it's not available in Nepal, and I'll probably next time I go to India.
I think it's in India.
India. So when
Uh,
I go to India, I'll buy that one next time when I go.
Well, you guys, maybe Amazon. I don't know. It's called.
No, yeah. No, you don't get it in Nepal. The Amazon is not there in Nepal. So
Oh, okay.
when I go next time, probably I'll get the book. And like you,
I'll have to have a word with Jeff Bezos.
yeah. So, did you always plan to write a book, or was it something that happened
No,
unplanned?
no, I didn't really. It was just if I turned them down because I didn't, fortunately, I didn't need the money, and I didn't really want to. Because a lot of the publishers wanted me to write all about the shit, and there were some great stories, but I could never eat lunch in this city again if I started writing about those. So I wasn't going to do that, and so it was only really when I was having dinner one night with a friend of mine called Neil Blair, who's J.K. Rowling's agent, and we had a couple of glasses of wine, and I started telling him all these stories. Excuse me. And he said to me, "So I'm taking these lung decongestant pills. 1 second." And he said to me, "These stories are so good. I'm going to speak to J.K. Rowling's publisher and see if we can get you a publishing deal." And that's what happened. And in the end, I was able to say, "Look, I don't want to write about the crap. I want to write about anecdotally the whole process of how we did what we did." And I didn't want to say, here's this famous person, here's that famous person. Anyway, because having worked with Maradona and also Mikhail, Gorbachev, and a whole bunch of people, I felt we could make it enlightening and entertaining without putting everybody down. So I think we succeeded. We sold a lot of books here. Went to #1 here for 3 weeks, and it's in about 17 countries around the world. So I hope if anybody wants an insight into the football world or the sports world, because it's what I did with the NBA and the NFL, NHL in America as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. And it's available on Amazon, but not in Nepal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I'll probably get it whenever I go next. And so, do you have any plans of writing another book, or is it done?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I probably could write a lot more about what's going on now because the world's going to readjust. But I think there's probably not a sequel. No, I was fortunate enough to get an OBE in the New Year's Honours list this Christmas just gone. So, and that was largely for the charity work that we do. And I'd like to focus a little bit on that in the coming 2 or 3 years, because I think a lot of people are going to need help post-pandemic. And then there's probably another big trick in me somewhere. I'm not sure where it is. I think it's, I think what's going to happen is I think a lot of leagues are going to sell some of their inventory to equity houses. So I'm quite involved with some of the big American and Asian funds. And I'd like to be there helping governments and the funds reshape sport for the 2020s. That's what I'm going to do next, before I get too old.
Definitely. And I wish you luck for that. And so I'll ask you final 2 questions before we wrap up. And the
Sure.
first one is, during your career when you're representing player, is there any one particular deal that stands out for you the most?
Yeah, I think there's one. And my brother Phil and myself were working with a player called Kevin Phillips at Watford, and he was going nowhere. I mean, it just wasn't happening for him. And he worked in the building yard with his dad and played for a local amateur team called Billericay. And we both felt that there was something special about him. He was very little, and for a striker, it's that much harder. Although Maradona was, and I said Maradona and Messi are both little as well. Anyway, we managed to convince Peter Reid at Sunderland to take a look at him before he left football, and he performed really well in a training game. And we linked quite heavily on Peter, and he was good enough to take responsibility, and he signed him, and he became probably the most famous or second famous, I don't know, player in the history of Sunderland Football Club. He was Super Kevin Phillips. Everybody loved him. He scored so many goals. He was absolutely magnificent. And now I think there's moments like that you look back and go, wow, we made a difference. We made a positive difference.
Definitely. I think if I'm not wrong, he's the only English player to win the European Golden Boot.
I think so. You're right. Yeah, your information is absolutely correct.
Definitely. So I think it did make an impact. And Peter Reid also was in India, I think, in the Indian Super League quite some time back.
I love the Indian Super League, by the way. It's run by a friend of mine, Martin Bain. Um, I'm quite friendly with one particular owner, the guy who owns Odisha, and a few of the other teams I know quite well. It's a great league. You know, I've never understood why India. I mean, it hasn't got a academy system probably, but I've never understood why such a wonderful sporting continent. Not a continent, it's a country, but it's as big as a continent. Hasn't produced one. Yes, it has, and I worked with Michael Chopra, who's at Blackburn. But there should be a raft of them. There should be a whole raft of them because it's sporting excellence is part of the Indian heritage, and that's something I'd like to. I'd like to try and help. It's a long journey. That I'd like to try and help India produce a few superstars.
Definitely. And so we'll wrap it up with one final question. And you personally have overcome a lot of difficulties to reach where you are. So, and that's very inspiring when I read about you. Like in your website, and also many places when I was preparing a lot of questions for this interview. And if you had to give a piece of advice to maybe anyone, I would not like confine it to maybe agents, to anyone who wants to just general maybe life advice to anyone who's listening, what would you give?
Well, it's a very good question. Um, I remember when I was growing up, the world was a lot simpler in those days, and people say, "Well, you can make your dreams come true. Just have enough ambition." It doesn't work that way. Um, Lovely line from a John Lennon song: "Life is what happens while you're making other plans." The one reason you'll be successful is because you are omnifunctional. So as the world throws curveballs at you, you know how to deal with it, not to get too down, or if you do get down, pick yourself up quickly, dust yourself down. I mean, I still get things in my life, and I'm 68 now, that I think, Jesus, did that really happen? Did I not learn that lesson when I was 26? Or something, quirks of circumstance. A friend of mine did very well, sold his business, and then tried to buy it back and bought it back in February last year, got wiped out with COVID. No one can plan that. So you've got to roll with the punches. So my best advice is never never accept that defeat is inevitable, because I've always found somewhere in life, as the doors close, there's always a side window open somewhere. If you can get through that, then you're back in the game again. Excuse the mixed metaphors.
No, definitely. But that is, I mean, like, yeah, that makes sense. And I think even I have experienced that the door and side window. Although maybe I experienced a door opening instead of a side window. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, like that was amazing talking to you. Just like I just want to wrap it up with final few words. Like when I read, like you could not, like you had speaking problems till you're 17 and to reach where you are, because till 17 or even like till 10 people generally write you off, and to come back it's very difficult. At least I don't know about there, but here it is, in a more maybe conservative society, it, it's difficult. And what you have done, maybe it's inspirational for many people coming, and many people can maybe take inspiration. Maybe you can make a movie now, like what do you think?
We have had some conversations about turning the book into a mini TV series, but I don't know. We'll see how those go. Look, I mean, there are many more inspirational people than me, but if I've helped a few people, I've been lucky enough. I found a wonderful man who helped cure my speech, which was impossible. I couldn't really talk till I was 17, which is why I talk so much now, maybe. But you keep learning. Life, the beauty about life is that you keep learning lessons. And, everyone's an inspiration to somebody. So all I say is just be the best inspiration you can, not just to somebody but to yourself.
Definitely. And like when you said, like when I hear that story when you were young, the only movie that comes to your mind is The King's Speech. And
yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, that was I love that movie for obvious reasons, you know. But you know, I'm actually a patron of the British Stammering Association now, and there's some wonderful work being done. I mean, I would say that if we get early day testing in schools, we'll be able to not eradicate it, because you know your brain at 2 years of age, while you're learning to speak, can sometimes go off in a tangent. If we can detect that early enough, we can probably stop 80–90% of the communication problems, the verbal communication problems on the planet. So that's an ambition of ours as well. Always
Definitely,
good to have another ambition.
definitely, and that's I think the for me at least that's the best one of the lot.
Listen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank
Thanks.
you for giving me a platform, and thank you for your time. I wish you well in Nepal. The Himalayan mountain tragedy, that's not close to you, is it? The one that happened the
No,
other day?
it's in India. It's not. It doesn't affect this part a
Okay.
lot.
No,
And
it's
yeah,
still,
that was sad. The glaciers, what happened, and I think still the rescue operation is still going on, and it's sad. It's just sad, and I do not know what to comment on this. It's just sad, and
no, it's very sad. I mean, I got to say, if I was 10 years younger, even, I mean, I've run marathons at the North Pole and stuff like that, I'd probably have given Everest a go. But I'm probably a bit too old for that now, probably, especially post COVID.
even when I was speaking to Mr. Jonathan Barnett, I think he also wanted to come down and maybe climb Everest.
How is Jonathan? He's one of my favorite people. I like
No,
him a lot.
I
How
I
was he?
I do not know how he's right now, but I spoke to him. I think in October he was good. He was quite well back then.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Listen, I wish you well. Thank you for your time and your patience, and I hope this is good for you and your audience. Keep in touch. Anyway, let us know if there's anything that we can do to
Sure.
give any help.
Thank you so much, John. And after reading the book, I'll do give you a feedback and hope to have you back again someday where the world is in a better place. And thank you once again. Till then, best of luck for all your endeavors, especially the one where you're working, like to maybe not cure but better the system. And
Thank you.
best of luck for that. And take care, stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. We'll speak again. Bye bye.
Bye.